Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Will Fraser, founder of 101st and co-founder of Pineapple. Coming up on today's show, Will goes on the offensive.
Why didn't you say you didn't understand this? Why didn't you ask me again?
Phil drops a spoiler. Spoiler alert for anybody who was waiting for you to say that. And Will drops some food for thought.
The very things we do to try and get high performance don't give us high performance.
All that and so much more as we chat through the interesting intersection of elite sport and business and how lessons can be applied into the world of culture and high performance. Will drops so many things in here that may change your perspective on some things, and he's very generous throughout. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like and a share wherever you can. Enjoy. And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Will Fraser. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, here we are on a Monday afternoon in the middle of Jan, and this is Blue Monday, apparently.
Yes, I actually got told that earlier today.
Yeah.
Didn't appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not feeling that blue. So
no, same.
hopefully
I
no
am
one else
wearing
is
blue, but that's branding for the show. That's nothing else other than that. But anyway, we digress. Yeah, just maybe to kick us off by telling the world what it is that you actually do day to day.
Day to day. So work-wise, I run a people and culture consultancy called 101st, and we work cross industries with multiple different clients, looking at all of those kind of core human dynamics that lead to performance, team performance, high performance, kind of whatever guys we want to kind of look at it through. And then I also am a co-founder of Pineapple, which is probably more apt for this show, which is a people data benchmarking business. So it's across the industry, trying to understand trends when it comes to attrition, when it comes to labor turnover, when it comes to splits of demographics of employees, all these sorts of things, to try and give people and brands as much information as possible to be able to make the most informed decisions when it comes to people's strategies and how they want to kind of build out the culture of their organization. So yeah, they're the two bits that keep me busy.
It feels like one would feed the other and
In
the other
theory.
way around. Yeah.
Yeah, in theory. Yeah, no, well, it was 101st came first, without saying the word first so many times.
And did you?
And it really, I'd done some bits of work with Phil Eels, of Honest fame and various other, and we kind of got chatting, and there was an opportunity for us to get involved in hospitality. I didn't really know the industry that well, so Phil was kind of helping us figure that out, and kind of that process then became Pineapple. And so kind of 101st led to that. And yeah, in theory, when you're looking at trends across the industry and 90-day labor turnovers, internal progressions of different roles, it does then lead you to look at, well, what's the cause of these trends and why are some scores different to others and where do people sit? And then when you kind of really boil it all down, again, it comes back to kind of people and cultural challenges, issues, dynamics that really are at the heart of a lot of these things. So then, yeah, in theory, 101st comes in and we can help and do those sorts of bits. But it's been a really interesting learning curve for me because within Pineapple, there's four of us as kind of co-founders, and I'm the only non-hospitality person, so I didn't have a hospitality background. So it's been a huge kind of learning curve for me in terms of the industry and understanding a lot more about it and kind of why things are done the way they're done. But yeah, I'm waffling. To your question, in theory, they both help each other.
No, but do you know, I think it's massively useful that there is a set of eyes on this stuff that's not necessarily emotionally involved with the industry in the way that maybe the other guys are, because that's been their background and their life. You're able to, I suppose, maybe run an objective eye over this. What is the data telling us? It's telling us X without that kind of the blinkers that maybe come on. Well, there's a reason for that, and there's a reason for that, and there's a reason for that, which is what happens naturally in the order of things, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think so. The others will tell you whether I do or not. But
Yeah,
I'd
get them
like
on
to think
next.
so. That's it. Yeah, but I think, but again, it's when my 101st hat on, We work across public sector, financial services, insurance, professional sports clubs. So we cross all kind of all sectors and industries. And as a result of that, everything has to be looked at very objectively. And so I think, yeah, the ability to bring that into the pineapple kind of world and have those very kind of objective conversations and also ask the obvious questions. And again, you get this in all lines of work, in all organizations. But to your point, when people are involved in something for a long period of time, actually a lot of the assumed simple questions are the ones that we haven't actually answered. So for someone to come in and ask those mundane, well, why is that? Why do you do that? And why is this shift look the way it is? And why is, hopefully it can just starts conversations that maybe otherwise wouldn't have happened.
Mm. Yeah, and gets people thinking maybe a little bit differently about the problem, right? Rather than
Hopefully.
maybe an inherited mindset about something that's come from just because that's the way it's been for the last
Yeah,
15 years or whatever.
massively. And I think, and again, it's hospitality is no different to any other industry in the sense that it's the same kind of myths and assumptions that we operate under that guide loads of decision making around things like talent, around things like internal progression or bringing people from the outside. So there's all these myths around that we can just move people around and they'll be just as good as they were in the previous team. But we know from nearly all the data and all the research anecdotally that that's not the case. Yet that's entirely how 99% of teams operate under that kind of assumption. So I suppose it's the ability to actually say, well, here is the data, here is the research, anecdotally, here's how it plays out in other industries, organizations. So actually, do we still want to do this? Because, and again, you get a lot more so in the corporate world, but a lot of you have these big plans and these big strategies, and they're often very long-term things. And so we tell our teams and we ask them to buy into this kind of long-term plan, but the incentives we put on everyone are incredibly short-term. So we're asking them to kind of buy into this 3-year plan, but they've got to hit their numbers by the end of the month.
Yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, they're not here for the 3-year plan. So it's kind of like we get these very contradicting systems in which we kind of operate in, but no one, or very rarely do we kind of question them or reevaluate them just because that's just how it's always been, right? And a lot of these things are so ingrained that they're unlikely to physically change. But I think the way in which we can implement them and talk about them could change.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big believer that it all starts with the willingness to engage in that conversation in the first place, right? Is that on
Mm,
the one hand, you might see a set of data which leads you to a conclusion. On the other hand, you have the operators who are you're working with this on a day-to-day basis. And somewhere in there is a solution that's perhaps not been thought about before between those two things. But it all starts with the willingness to at least come to the table and engage.
100%. And often the reason that doesn't happen is again this perception of time or the assumed lack of time. And it's one of these ones where a lot of the time these questions they get asked because no, we need to crack on with the job. Like we've got this service to run, or we've got this meeting to go to, or whatever it might be. So these things get kind of put down the pecking order. But when you actually have the conversation, universally, what comes out of them is huge because you can bust a lot of these myths and you can correct misunderstandings and it's this kind of beautiful irony that the very conversations that are going to most benefit us at work, we don't have because of work.
Right.
We don't take the time to have this conversation because I've got that email to send or I've got that service to run or whatever it might be. But yet we all agree that these are the conversations that are materially most going to benefit us at work. So it's this whole thing of everyone can talk about this stuff, right? And it's really and also as I'm sure we'll cover off in this conversation, like nothing's rocket science. Like this stuff is almost blindingly obvious when you actually talk it through. But it's we often talk about this concept of common sense but uncommon practice. So we all know this. We all know that high performing teams are incredibly cohesive. There's huge levels of shared understanding. They have the conversation you need to have, all these sorts of things. But doing it is incredibly difficult because of the types of industry you work in, because of what's gone before, because of baggage and legacy from elsewhere. All these things that really make it very difficult to implement on the face of it what are very simple things. And so it's then to your point where the data, the pineapple bits come really handy. It's because it gives you that visual representation of actually we need to have this conversation because if we don't have this conversation, these numbers aren't going to get any better.
Yeah.
And it's also understanding with data as well is what do you actually want out the other side? Because some people want constant change, and lots of data and researchers say that's not necessarily a good thing, but sometimes that's what people want because it's that perception that we're moving with the times and this, that, and the other.
Mm.
So then they might look at the data and go, perfect, we're bang on the mark. It
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter about the industry, we're where we need to be. Whereas others will think they can be opposite and some sit in the middle. So to your point, A lot of this stuff is just conversation starters, really. Because again, data's data, but it doesn't. That's the data's not going to change what you do. It's what you do with that data and the conversation you have about the data that changes it. And that's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, I just, I suppose the data in the end just helps maybe, I don't know, simplify the issue into something that people can see that it's actually, it is or it isn't
100%.
making a difference.
100%. And it's often, again, when you look at it from the point of view of who actually makes the decisions in a lot of these organizations, in Hostel, it's the board, it's the founders, and often when it comes to people, it can feel very fluffy and it can feel very kind of intangible. And there's never really been, hard numbers to back up. Well, if we do this people strategy, this is the impact it's had. So what the data does is give you that, right? So you can actually put it into board packs and go to the decision makers and validate the strategy you want to implement, validate budget and spend by showing them, well, this is where we are, and this is where we are against almost our direct competitors, quote unquote. So if we're saying we want to be this and we're not willing to invest in our people in this way, then do we actually want to do this?
Mm,
Because we're not going to get there or sustainably get there if we don't. So I think it just allows people to kind of call out the BS to put it blunt. It allows
yeah,
them
yeah,
to actually say, well, listen, we say we're a people-focused organization, but
yeah. The
that
data
doesn't
maybe
look
says it's
people.
something else.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
and this is the thing, and it's often this kind of like I told us a long time ago. It's like people, not everyone. It's a massive generalization. So people watching this don't take anything. But if someone tells you they're a really humble person, they're probably actually quite arrogant. Because the reason they're telling you they're humble is for you to go, oh wow, that's amazing, like good on you, which is that entirely, selfish, and it's I need you to pump me up.
yeah,
And there's a lot of things when people say we're people first and we're people driven, the chances are they're probably not. The fact they have to say that they are means that they're probably not, right? When you look at the organizations that genuinely are, it's not something they necessarily go publicly talk about. It's not because it's what we don't need to, because it's not something we're doing for everyone else. We're doing it for us.
yeah,
And the byproduct of that is actually we have an incredibly high functioning team who understand what we're doing and how to do it. So therefore, actually, then what we do as an output is amazing. And I think this is where that data can kind of call out some of that BS in certain organizations.
yeah. Well, my big learning is that I am never telling anybody that I'm a humble person anymore.
I say that obviously semi-facetiously, but it's that premise, right? Like a lot of things, if sometimes if you feel the need to say, there's a reason why you feel the need to say it,
Yeah,
and it's often because it's not necessarily completely genuine. Not all the time,
yeah,
for anyone watching, but sometimes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I there's way more that I want to get into around this stuff, but actually, what I kind of done this a little bit backwards, but I want to give context as to how you've started kind of talking about this in the first place. Now, anybody can go into your LinkedIn profile and they'll get a sense of who you are and what you have done in your life so far. But this was the whole reason why I was captivated by your story and this stuff that we've started talking about here at an event last year that you were speaking at on behalf of Pineapple. But it was actually the story of you were talking about your background as a rugby player. I'll just
Mm.
spoiler alert for anybody who was waiting for you to say that. But it was then kind of how that informed what happened next in your
Mm.
life. I found really really fascinating, and I would love for you to kind of just go back and talk to us. One, because I love rugby, but two, how it kind of transpired from there. What did you see in that world that you thought could translate?
Yeah. Yeah, so anyone that's heard that, found out I used to play rugby and is like, oh, I've never heard of you before, don't be surprised. I wasn't very good, which is probably why you've you've never heard of me. So I played for a team called Saracens, and I played in a period of time where the club were incredibly successful. I think in kind of the 10-year stint I had there, we basically won kind of everything. I think that's we won 3 European Cups, 5 Premierships, and I was able to be part of that environment and that team and all the good stuff that came along with it. But before all of that, we were so average. Like we were kind of bottom rudder of the league. We weren't doing very well, and the club had, by their own admission, had tried every option to turn it around, and nothing, chuck money at it, do whatever, and nothing really worked. So they decided to kind of last chance saloon, go down this route of people and culture. So and they did that through various kind of ways. But I was a young kid. I think I was 18, 19 at the time, just come out of school, first professional contract in the academy. And so, I was a sponge. And so everything the club did and how it operated was all I knew. I'd only known this way of being involved in a team and all this sort of stuff. And so when I got towards my career was littered with injuries. So in 10 years, I had 10 operations on most parts of my body and
Eesh.
various other injuries and ailments. So I ended up, shock horror, retiring from the sport at 27 because of an injury. I had quite a serious neck injury. And so when I finished, the club at that time had kind of made very public this cultural, what we called the revolution. And we had a lot of our kind of corporate partners very interested in, well, how does that give you that? So how does this shift in mindset and focus make you a better rugby team or better rugby players? And so I basically got kind of tasked with this thing of, well, can you go to these corporate clients and talk it through? And then that turned into its own kind of form of consultancy. So my whole kind of life in professional sport was so intrinsically around this people focus and this the jobs, the byproducts. We become a good rugby team as a result of all these other things, but we have to do all these other things first. So that's kind of all I'd known. And so then we took that into kind of our corporate partners and sponsors. And so my professional life was that. Then post professional sport was still in that space, but from a, I don't know, consulting point of view, facilitating point of view, however you want to look at it. And in those couple of years after I finished playing, and I was running that part of the business, it's just the insight into how other teams operate and the views other teams have, and it's real kind of punch in the gut stuff for me of how different it was because I came in on the obvious assumption that well, everyone must know this or everyone must do this because why wouldn't you? And it couldn't be more untrue when you
Right.
actually come out to kind of the real world. And so, yeah, so that those things combined then led to 101st being born and created, and that is what we do, people in culture consultants, as I said at the start. So that's I suppose a whistle stop tour of kind of how we got into what we're doing. But I just think it's just I suppose shifting the lens by which we view performance because so much of how we view performance doesn't actually get you the thing you're trying to get. So we focus so much on a general royal kind of but on getting the best tech and getting the best operating model or whatever it might be, which obviously all add into it and help. But we put so much onus on that when they inevitably don't work, that's what we blame. So then we go and get a new strategy, or we go and get a new operating model, and we just kind of go on this revolving door of all those sorts of things. When actually the very first strategy was golden. Like the model we used to operate under was perfectly fine. The reason it's not working is because no one understands it. We've not taken the time for people to actually understand, well, how does that impact me in my role? How does that change who I'm interacting with, the conversations I need to have? What's my view on it compared to your view on it? Because we're both going to see things slightly differently. And it's that gap of understanding is then where we put the forks in the wrong place or we serve the wrong table. I'm making this up, but
Yeah.
you get the point. So it actually has nothing to do with necessarily the plan or the model or the competency of the people, but nearly everything to do with the lack of understanding of the plan or the model or the people that we're working with. And that's when we come to time, because they're the conversations we don't have because we've got to do this thing, right? So we kind of come up with this brand new plan and then we town hall it to the whole organization on under the assumption that because we've told them, they now know it.
Yeah, that
And
one that
that's
one
it.
conversation where
But this is it. But it's
somebody's mind is
amazing.
somewhere else as well when they're t trying to take it in,
So
and
many things, right?
yeah,
And also just the fact that that's just not how we take on information. And then everyone takes it on to so, but then inevitably 6 months' time, when we're not where we thought we would be, it kind of like, well, how did you not know this? I told you in the meeting 6 months ago. Or why didn't you say you didn't understand this? Why didn't you ask me again? And they're kind of ridiculous because then you go, well, why didn't someone stick their hand up? If I didn't know that, why didn't I voice my concern? Well, because if I stick my hand up, I'm admitting I don't understand what you're saying. So I'm going to be looked at in a certain way or judged in a certain way because I probably should, the assumption is I should know it because of the level of seniority I am. So you get all these very natural human things
yeah,
but they're the things we don't actually talk about or address. And because they take time, like to get someone to create an environment where people are genuinely comfortable to challenge and to stick their hand up in a room full of their colleagues and their peers and their friends and say, sorry, can you just explain that one more time? That doesn't happen just because we tell people. The amount of time you hear people say, oh, I tell my team to challenge all the time, but no one does it.
yeah.
And I'm going, well, really? Are you surprised no one does it? Like it's, just because you tell someone to challenge you doesn't mean they're suddenly going to challenge you.
It
How do you
is, yeah,
create? Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you got to create the space, and that takes a huge amount of time and intention. We often talk around this stuff being no different to physical training. If you want to get stronger, you go to the gym and you lift weights. If you want to get faster, you go and run. Right? If you stop going to the gym, you'll become weaker. If you stop running, you'll become slower. And this is no different. Like you've got to train it. You've got to dedicate time, space, and permission to actually have these conversations. The more you have them, the better it's going to get. The less you have them, the more you're going to regress. And it's actually the fact that people don't have them at all, have no idea why something bad or why something hasn't worked, and then kind of blame all the wrong things. And those wrong things end up costing you more money.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
go on this like, this kind of spiral, if you like.
Perpetual cycle of
Yeah.
changing the wrong things, I suppose.
And you see it in sport all the time. That's why sport's such a good kind of metaphor and analogy and a narrative for these things. Like football's a prime example. You look at managers, you look at players, the turnover's through the roof. And I think it's something like the average manager contract for the Premier League is 3 years. The average tenure, I think, is 1 year or less. So something crazy. In the Championship, I think it's zero point 0.8 years, the average tenure of a manager. So you're literally paying people not to work for you.
Yeah,
You get managers signed on 5, 10 year contracts and they're out the door in 9 months, 10 months.
yeah.
So and that's an industry that obviously can absorb that kind of that money. But the premise is true in most industries, as in terms of how we look at performance and how we judge people in it.
Yeah, and actually, if you take keeping with the football analogy, because there's real world examples as well, I suppose, whereby you look at teams that are punching above their weight in perceptive terms as to the club
Mm.
size. I'm talking about clubs like Brighton and Brentford
Yeah, yeah.
and the like, who don't have the infrastructure of a big club like Liverpool or Man United or
Mm.
whoever, and yet still,
Yeah.
even when people leave the organization because undoubtedly they're having success, so bigger clubs look at their managers, bigger clubs look at their players, and they take these players away, but there seems to be
Mm.
someone else waiting, or at least somebody is coming into this team that is already operating well. And to your point earlier on around, I suppose that seems to me that's when that clarity of the vision, that
Mm.
clarity of who we are as a unit, not just and individually, the individual component parts of that, the values that we need to show on a day-to-day basis, I would imagine are all part of how a team like that is able to perhaps outperform its perception of what it should be able to
Absolutely.
perform.
Absolutely. And we've got a phenomenal guy called David Jones, a sports psychologist who's worked in football, rugby, Formula One, and he's just a data and stat machine with this sort of stuff. But I believe Brighton and Brentford are kind of top two in the league for the least amount of money spent per Premier League point earned. So again, if you look, it's how do you judge success? Like, they're both doing phenomenally well. You'd say they're not quite, winning the Premier League level yet. But if you look at what they spend per point they earn, compared to a Chelsea, to a Man United, to the other big clubs, it's phenomenal. Like they're incredible setups and systems. And then if you look at particularly managers at Brighton and Brentford, these managers that have been there for a long term, been very successful, and they leave and go to another club and completely tank.
Mm,
And you see that with players that leave the clubs as well often. And then you go, well, they can't suddenly become a terrible manager overnight. It's not that you lose that skill set, but you get this other, myth around talent in that we own all our talent. What little talent I had as a rugby player, I didn't own all of that. It belonged to the system in which I played in. I played in an environment that allowed me to do the things that I was good at, that allowed me to be comfortable in my own skin, that allowed me to be able to ask the questions I needed to ask, and all these sorts of things, which then enabled me to be a really good player. Well, I say really good, an all right player on the pitch to help my team, right? And so when you look at these players and managers that leave, are successful, then leave and they tank, it's not, they're in a brand new system. They're doing the same job in inverted commas, right? In the brand new system with brand new people. On average, they say it takes about 3 months just to learn the language of a new team, so just understand the acronyms and what's going on. But by that point, if it were the Premier League manager, it's already on the front page of the newspapers that you got the full backing of the board, right? Which means
yeah,
you're on the way
yeah,
out.
that's the end of
So,
that. Yeah,
but if you take that as a premise, that's true of nearly every team in all industries, whereby we move people around because they've been very good in the job they're in and the team they're in. So we move them to another team that needs their help, and it doesn't work out how we thought it would work out. So we blame the person. When they're in a brand new system with brand new people that do the same thing but in a different way, different philosophy, different personalities, and we don't give them the time to kind of to bed that in. And it comes back to the single time again. Like it's kind of the root cause of a lot of these things. But it's our talent. So much of what we do is because of where we do it, who we do it with, and how we do it that allows us to be really successful at it. And
yeah,
we're literally shooting ourselves in the foot by constantly taking people out and moving them, because then you're losing all that level of understanding they had in that group, and you've got this massive hole that then gets filled by someone else. And when that new person comes in, they've got to relearn all the things the other person had built up over weeks, months, or years. And it's in the relearning of it is then where mistakes happen, obviously, because they're not going to know certain things. And then because they come in, mistakes happen, they go, hang on, you've been doing this for 10 years. How are you making that mistake? So then they go and they bring, and you kind of just, we just rinse and repeat and keep this thing going.
Mm.
Now, it's not saying that you should keep everyone in situ all the time and never change, because that's equally bad, right? In a different way. But I think what we talk about a lot, and what David, our sports psychologist, talks about a lot, is we don't fully understand the context of the changes that we make. And the assumptions around what impact that change is going to have are just wrong most of the time. So that thing of, it's not saying you can't move, you shouldn't move people about, because sometimes you have to, and sometimes it is the right thing to do. But we need to understand, well, what impact is moving that person actually going to have on the team they're leaving and the team they're going to? And then once we know that, then we can make the relevant decisions off the back of it in the right context, as
Yeah.
opposed to making them out of context, and therefore they're just wrong and they don't work.
Yeah. I suppose what you're saying is that like there's no one right way forsaking the other way of doing things. You kind of need everything to fire. That if you've got a really strong system in place that people can come into, and if say you've got a team of 10 people all really well performing together, you take one of those people out and replace them with somebody else, is that it's automatically going to make that team, probably regardless of the talent of the individual, is going to make that team slightly weaker in the short term
Mm,
until that human being is able to get up to speed of
yeah.
the way things are done,
Yes.
and they'll know themselves whether it is the right place for them within that time frame as well. Because that's the other side of the coin here, isn't it? Is that it's not, yes, as an organization, you're striving towards creating a place that is high performing,
Mm,
good with your people and everything that we all know that we should be doing. But it also needs the other party to come to that party
yeah.
and perform
100%.
as well.
100%. And it's not saying that, and I think again this is a trap people fall into, that if to be, and I always hate using high because it's such an overused term, it's become a bit of an oxymoron, high performance, because the very things we do to try and get high performance don't give us high performance. um
You need to explain
it,
that one.
but it's well, like it's a prime example, right? We're trying to get high performance by constantly moving people around, but actually in doing so, we're killing our ability to perform at any half decent level because of all the things we've just said. But I suppose it's also not saying there is no one way to do this, right? It's not saying you have to do this to be a high performer, because it's entirely dependent on the dynamics of that group of people and how they operate. It's when people say, this is the best style of leadership or whatever it is. Frankly, I think it's a complete horse, because there's no one style of leadership that everyone fits all. How you lead is entirely dependent on the group of people that you're leading. And one group of people might need quite an authoritarian, dictatorial thing because they're new to the game or whatever it might be, whereas another group need the complete reverse of that. So you've got to be able to adapt and flip between those two, dependent on the people that you're leading. And so I think with this stuff, you're right. It's not again, it goes back to this understanding piece. It's not necessarily like the plan or the style that's the issue. It's do people understand the plan? Do people know what the style is? Do we have that clarity in where we're trying to go and how we're going to get there? That is the understanding piece that allows these things to work or not. And nearly every organization we work with, every client we work in, there's a gap of understanding. And it's that gap of understanding is then where all the issues have happened, or where the mistakes have occurred. It's nothing to do with their competency. It's nothing to do with their work ethic or anything like that. It's nearly always to do with the fact that, oh, I just didn't realize that's what you wanted, and it is as basic as that. But then to solve that takes time, as we said, because you've got to create the space where they can ask the question. You've
Yeah.
got to create the space where you can go to them. And also, as people running businesses, it's that first thing of going, well, if someone's made a mistake, the reality is that's probably my fault, not theirs, because they clearly didn't understand the brief or the task, and that can only be on me. How did I really help them learn what we're trying to do here? Did I just tell them this is what it is and that's that? And so I think it also reverses that process and naturally then makes things slightly longer term. Because if it's me, then I need to go away and figure out, all when I tell them next time, how do I do it?
Mm.
Is there a way of actually like, this is what I'm thinking, go away and come back and tell me what your thoughts, and tell me actually what you think this means for you in these sorts of bits. But again, we don't do it because that takes longer.
Yeah.
And I need
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
done now. I need this done Yeah.
Yeah, especially in highly operational businesses. I
Mm.
suppose it is about perception of importance of something, right? And if
Yeah.
a lot of the time in operationally heavy businesses, there's firefighting going on kind
Yeah.
of on a daily basis, and you then prioritize what should be done. But it's not. I think the key thing is, from my understanding at least, is that that's fine, and we all understand that,
Mm.
but you can't neglect this as a result because otherwise you literally just find yourself in the same cycle of problem.
Yeah.
And in fact, it might give you a better ability slash less things to firefight on because you've got a more cohesive team that are all pulling towards the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. And it's one of those ones, and again, why this is tricky to implement because it's a very indirect return on investment. So it's not something that you do today and get the benefit of tomorrow. This is something you do for 6 months and you'll see the benefit of it maybe in another 6 months.
Mm,
It's a slow burn. But then you're right. But then usually what happens is it's very kind of retrospective. You see the benefit of it because you'll either solve a massive problem together or you'll have like an amazing quarter or year, whatever it is. Then retrospectively you look back and go, oh wow, that I mean I never would have had this conversation with you a year ago. Like we never would have done this with the previous owner. Yeah, I'm making this up, but it's the looking back. No, the only reason we did is because we put these things in place, because we had these types of conversations, because we actually dedicated time to ask the questions that we need to ask, not the ones, you know, that I should ask to make me look a certain way or whatever it might be. And so that's again why it's because everything else gives you a tangible return or not. Right, you buy a new platform or tech, or you move office or whatever it is, you know very quickly whether that's worked or not. Whereas this stuff, it sits behind all of that, right? And as I said, down the track, you figure it out. But and it's also that thing of again, if things don't work, it's did we actually do everything we need to do? Because it can also be true that you look back and go, well, yeah, we did, and it still didn't work,
mm,
which is fine. Like but it allowed you to make that decision with as much information as you can get in the right context. And the problem is because we don't do that, we often make poor decisions out of context, which then doubles down on them not working.
right. Yeah.
Five-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
Yeah. And then a byproduct of that is that the finger gets pointed in the wrong direction in
Yeah,
order to then try and
yeah,
affect some kind of change again.
100%. And there comes a point where if someone's not working out, they're not working out, right? And then decisions need to be made. Of course they do.
Yeah.
But we pull that trigger so early. We very rarely give people the actual time they need to know whether it has or hasn't worked. That Chasing Stars book, Boris Groysberg, he did a bit of research specifically into kind of investment managers in the States. And he basically found that if you move from bank A to bank B, it takes you nearly 5 years to get to the performance level in bank B that you had in your first bank.
Wow. Right.
But our assumption is you made a ton of money over there, so come here and make a ton of money for us now. I need you to do today what you did for them yesterday.
Mm,
But on average, it takes about 5 years. Now, that's the timeline isn't true necessarily of all industries, but the premise is true. Is that if you're coming across, that's going to take longer than we think it's going to take for you to realize your potential and get you to that performance level. So it's how willing are we as an organization to really kind of dive into that and stare that square in the face and because it will be uncomfortable and it will be difficult.
yeah.
But if we get out the other side of it and we get through that, then what we get the return on it is huge. And it's that like bit in the middle where the horse bolts. Yeah. And people go, no, not working, we're gone.
Yeah.
And that's where that culture piece comes in then. Because you need everyone kind of pulling in, everyone mucking in and pulling their weight to kind of push through that period.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. I mean, anybody who's listening to this who's agreeing with us, perhaps that this all sounds great and all of that, but how the hell do I even get started with this stuff? Like
Yeah.
what's a great place to just like a simple thing that people could just get started with that you
Yeah.
think would make a reasonable difference to their direction of travel?
Book us to do a workshop.
Of course.
Which
Yeah.
no, I think it's with a lot of these things, it's like anything with so many like okay, let me get my words right. The best analogy I can use is when people try and kind of implement change or do something different. It's like trying to plant a plant without loosening the soil. Like people just try and ram this thing in and it doesn't take, it doesn't work, and if anything, actually kill the plant. And so in many ways, you've got to, it's a terrible analogy, but you've got to kind of loosen the soil first. And what I mean to allow the plant to bed in. So when it comes to teams, it's all well and good saying we want to do this strategy, we want to do this, but we never do any work on, well, who are we now? Like what are the actual challenges and issues we face right here, right now? What assumptions do we all currently hold around performance? Where are the variances of understanding across the organization? Because until we know what these things are, in many ways, the plan is useless because that can't work or can't fully work until we figure out this stuff. And actually, until we figure out this stuff, we don't really know what that plan is because we've made this plan without knowing the actual information of what's going on. So the first thing is, yeah, and it will be different guises and different ways of doing it, depending on the organization and the people involved. Is that loosening the soil piece of really taking a dive in and going, right, do we actually, and it sounds so obvious, but do we actually all agree on what we're trying to do here? And do we actually all understand how we're going to do that? And can we then do that when we're fucked and when we're tired and when we're sorry, I probably shouldn't have sworn.
Sorry, that's it's your call. 100%.
So yeah, so and
The
can we
show
do
doesn't
that?
mind. The show doesn't
So it
mind.
doesn't mind. Okay. If I known at the start, I would have gone. No. Yeah. So it's that kind of piece of work of, and people be amazed in the assumption that yeah, of course we're all on the same page. Of course we are. And you have that conversation and you realize, wow, we're really not.
Mm,
And people come at it, and that's the other side of it. People have different motivations, right? We all assume. I think particularly, I put myself in this boat being a founder. When you start something, it's your baby. You're so emotionally connected to it in every possible way. And so when you bring people in, the expectation is that you have to buy into this as much as I do, you know. But that's impossible because they're not connected to it in the same way you're connected to it. They're
yeah.
not financially solely involved in it. But the assumption is they do. So then when they do something and you go, really it's 5 o'clock and you're clocking off on the dot, but I need this, you immediately then form an opinion on them as a person because they're not doing it the way that you would do it. But then you go, well, of course they're not. This is a job. It's not, this is maybe a stepping stone to something else. It's someone just pays their mortgage or whatever it might be. So again, it's even that understanding that about your team. I think particularly at that kind of leadership level, because then that tells you so much about why they do the things they do, or why they have the assumptions that they have, or why they've understood something very different from that last conversation to what you understood from that last conversation. And so then once you know those things, then you can make a plan, right? Then you can go, cool, well, we need to figure this out. We're not going to spend all this money over here doing all this fancy stuff until we've done this, because that's just wasted otherwise.
Yeah. Does this come back to like from a very simplistic human, if there is such a thing, it's a human perspective? Does this come down to like creating a space? And this plays into the kind of the natural order of team building and why people spend money on basically trying to create a team that gets on at least enough to be able to have difficult conversations with each other without having to, shy away or have fear that you're going to offend somebody because you're about to say something that they're maybe not going to enjoy hearing. But it doesn't mean that it's nasty. It just means that it's a truth that needs to be heard. And actually, if we're going to move forward, we need to get these things out in the open and need to be very, very comfortable with that kind of process in terms of just getting the really uncomfortable stuff out there in the open so that we can address it and we're all moving forward. The reason I ask that, and I'm making my own assumptions here, is that as a rugby fan, I read stuff within the world of rugby all the time. And this is a lot of the stuff that comes out in the perception of how they build teams, high performing teams, as we'll call them. The very nature of playing a game like rugby is that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable because you're asked to stick your head in places that most people wouldn't normally do.
Yeah. And that's where sport, again, David Jones, I reference him a lot because he's a bit of a wizard on this stuff. But he says a professional sport is kind of like the real world times five from this point of view because of the nature of what you're doing in sport, and especially rugby and the competitive nature of it and these sorts of, yeah, it speeds it, that happens quicker than it does maybe a line of work outside of sport. But it's not a given. You can still have these highly dysfunctional sports teams, and actually most teams are highly dysfunctional in many ways. But yeah, that's exactly why you want to build a team, to have that, to be able to have those conversations, because not being able to have difficult conversations is one of the biggest performance killers. But again, it's really easy to say we need to have deeper understanding of each other and what we're doing to have these conversations, but to do it is incredibly difficult. I mean, it's no it's no coincidence that the people we're willing to have, or we could have the most difficult conversations with in our lives, are family and very close friends, right? On the whole. And it's no coincidence because we've known them most of our lives and our level of connection is so deep. Or it's easy to have with someone you've just met and you'll never see again because there's no fear of kind of what could come back
Yeah.
and hurt their feelings. But that's why people we work with is that real kind of middle ground, because we haven't necessarily known them our whole lives. We don't have that level of connection, but we have enough of a level of connection that we can't not care about what we say. We can't not worry about the judgment that might come back if I say this, which is why then you've got to really dive into that, right? And I think a lot of these things, what it gives you when you have that understanding is understanding the intention, because two people could give you the same critique, but one you'll take on board because you know the intention is they're trying to help you. One you'll just disregard or take incredibly personally because the intention is actually they're not trying to help you. They just want to critique and have a bit of a pop.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's that level, right? If someone critiques something you're doing, if you understand the intention is actually they're doing it because they want you to get better, they're doing it because they want us to succeed as an organization, as a team, it might be very difficult to listen and hear, but you're more likely to take it on board or have a constructive conversation off the back of it. If you know someone's doing it because they don't like you, you either just ignore it and crack on with what you're doing before, or as I said, you take it very personally and it kind of, you go into your shell and it has all the consequences off the back of that. So, and again, it's really important to note here as well, we're not saying here that we all have to be best mates. It's not this, we're not trying to get everyone to like us. That's not what this is, because if that's the way in which we're going about it, then we're not, that's kind of bullshit to a certain degree. Because if I'm trying to get you to like me, I'm going to feed into all the things that you like to get you to like me and get that. And then what we're trying to do here is build understanding, like understanding of each other and how we operate. And if we do that, the chances are we probably will like each other because we're people, we're humans. That's generally, but we could find out actually we don't like each other at all. But I have a deep understanding of you as a person and know how you operate and vice versa. So we're in a much better position to work together than pretending that we really like each other, but not knowing a single thing about each other.
Mm.
But again, I won't apologize for constantly saying it. That takes time.
Yeah.
Just because we go to the pub every other Thursday after work, we might have a great culture because it's good fun, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to work any better together. It doesn't
Mm.
necessarily mean we're actually going to hit the things we're trying to achieve. It just means we get to enjoy each other's company. If we do that over a huge amount of time, then maybe we'll start to see kind of the results of it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating stuff, right? And I suppose the thing is that there's no real right or wrong way to do this, but there are some indicators that can help inform what might be a better way to do things than perhaps you have been doing to this point.
Yeah.
And then the key thing is acting on that. And if it is creating a space where people can put their hand up and say, look, I'm sorry, I just didn't get that at all. Can you repeat it for
100%
me?
that's marker. If you've got people in your team that do that, that will challenge you on something they think is wrong or isn't going to work, then that's a really good sign. Really good sign. If you have every single person challenging you on everything you say, that equally might not be a good sign. If that just, but if you've got that space where in the right way, in a constructive way, someone will go, actually, Will, I don't. We tried that a couple of years back and it didn't really work. So it might be worth looking at something different. That's a really good spot. If you've got people that sit and go, Will, sorry, can you just run through that one more time? Because I don't actually quite understand what I'm saying. You're in a good spot. If you get something wrong, whatever it might be, and you've got a line manager or a leader in your team that comes and says, listen, let's go through this again. Let's talk it through. What didn't you understand? Then you're probably in a good spot. I think they're these intangible kind of markers that show that there's people are comfortable enough to question, to challenge, and people have enough awareness of the dynamic of the team and of themselves to know that actually understanding is at the core of a lot of these, or misunderstanding is at the core of a lot of these kind of issues and challenges.
Mm.
And it's also this thing of, again, you look at sport, you look across the board. In a world that's ever changing, stability is your competitive advantage. So if you can have some stability in, and again, David Jones, in people, plan, and process, when everyone around you is changing, everyone else is, this, the market's gone here, the market's gone there, cool, so we're going to bend and do this. Now, it's not saying never change, as I said before, because that doesn't get you anywhere either. But having some stability and then understanding, what if we change this? What is the context of that? What is the true impact if we change it? Then allows you to make the best decisions in context. It allows you stability, gives you that level of shared understanding, right? It's no wonder that a team that worked together for 10 years are way more cohesive than a team where three have worked together for 10 years and two are brand new,
Yeah.
right? And again, it's obvious, right? It's like nothing I've said here, people go, oh, wow, I had no idea. It's blindingly obvious, but again, it's very difficult to put into place because we have all these things within the system we work in that pull us towards these other, whether it's the way we're incentivized, whether it's the way organizations are structured, whether it's the shareholders, what the board are saying. You have all these other things that factor in. And so as well as having the understanding about each other and what we're trying to do, we need to have an understanding what the system is that we actually operate in. Because that basically governs what we can and can't do. And once we know all that, it's going, cool, where can we find some stability within all of this? And actually, when things get tough and performance drops, is that competency in personnel, or is it actually lack of understanding? And the chances are it's probably the latter. So if it's that, it's going, cool, well, how do we dive into that? David said this brilliant thing the other day. You might as well got David on here doing this, to be fair. I reference him, but it's this whole thing in sport of like, and a lot of the time if someone's in the wrong position, wrong place, yeah, it's often, oh, they're lazy. They're being lazy, not working hard enough. And it's this thing, if you're at that level of what you're doing, then no one's lazy. You can't get to that level by being lazy. So let's get rid of that as a reason, as an assumption. So if that's not the reason they're in the wrong place, then it has to be something over here, which is they didn't know where they needed to be. They thought they were meant to be here when they were meant to be somewhere else, or whatever else it is. And the core root of those ones is they didn't know it, or they didn't understand it. And then you go down the rabbit hole we just spoke about, go, well, how do they not understand it? Well, maybe we didn't make it clear, or we didn't give them space to ask us. And so you go down to all the things we spoke about. So if you just take out, when things go wrong, we jump to the easy, like we jump to the easy options, which is I just swap them out, bring someone else in.
Yeah.
But if we can say, and not all the time, of course, it's not all the time, and like all of these things, nothing's 100%, but through all the data and the research in this space, this is infinitely more successful going down that route and significantly more true of dynamics and situations. So if you take out a team, if you take out the excuse of competency, right, or the work ethic, take them out of the equation, what else could it be? Then it can only come to these understanding bits. Now, it could be competency, it could be work ethic. I'm not saying that it's never that, but it's way more likely to be these things than it is that.
Yeah.
So it just forces you to look at different avenues. And then the knock-on effect is that we create these much more sustainable teams that build understanding, that are part of this like longer term plan, that we're not constantly chopping and changing and all these sorts of things that then give you all, say, the data is quite compelling. That's what gives you, every high performing team in any industry has a certain level of cohesion within that group. And that cohesion is born out of time spent together, shared experiences, shared language, which gives you this huge amount of shared understanding across a group, which then allows everyone to have the clarity in what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then they're able to actually do that when they're tired, when they're under pressure.
Yeah. And then even just from that perspective, the understanding from the others is that because they've filled in that gap a little bit more, is that they'll have an understanding that Phil's not operating at his best because you can sense his energy levels are just a little bit down a bit. So we'll give him a couple of days to get himself back to
100%,
wherever it is, and all of it is just, I suppose, filling in as many blanks as you can of information around everything. I mean, it just sounds so easy when I say it like that, but But the more information you have on the individual, on their way of working, your way of working, how that equates to that way of working, like it sounds complicated when you say all of these intrinsic parts, but the hard facts of the matter are that's just about creating a space that's as open and honest as possible and isn't scared of fronting up to difficulty and isn't scared of fronting up to a difficult conversation with somebody and isn't scared to respond to that difficult question that might be asked, and all of that's built through time and trust. And well, trust is built through time, right? So and asking questions and having good conversations, not just any conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, any conversation is better than no conversation,
Yeah,
but you're right, yeah, as any leadership team or anyone running a business or running an organization, like it's a really tricky thing to do because to still have a business to run, right? And this as I said, this can feel very off-piste and can feel, you've got every workshop we run is always like, people at the start of the day are thinking, oh, my emails are stacking up and I've got all this other stuff to do. I need, this kind of anxiety to do it. But then as soon as you get into the conversation, it's like, oh my God, I had no idea that's what you thought this entire time.
mm,
Like, well, no wonder we've not done this thing if that's what you think and this is what I think.
yeah,
You have it, you generally, you have people that work together for years and years, and you run these sessions. They cut and literally like, I had no idea. That makes so much sense now as to why you did this and did that and did that, and you know, and they can be quite powerful conversations, right? Because again, it's very understand, and we all do. Even me saying everything I've said, I still made a ton of assumptions about things and people and decisions, right? It's just human nature.
yeah,
But the point is, again, it's not the making the assumption that's the issue. It's actually, do we have the awareness of like, we often say, do we think this or do we know this? Because if we think it, that means we haven't had that conversation. If we know it, it means we've had the conversation so we can make a decision.
mm,
And it's amazing how many massive decisions get made in big organizations because people think this thing or because people think that thing. And you go, wow, but that decision impacts hundreds of people. And you've made it off of nothing. You've
yeah,
made it off of an assumption that you think because these things have happened, you think this. But you don't know that because you haven't gone and had that conversation with someone. And so that's our biggest, again, what you said was small thing, getting started. That's another thing to do. Yeah, when we're making decisions, do I know this or do I think this?
yeah.
Because if I think it, I haven't had the conversation. So I need to go and have that conversation.
I love that because that's quite a simple mindset thing that you just implement tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
In the way that you attack issues and things like that. And yeah, I really love that. I'm very conscious of your time. Time is ticking. This was always going to happen. What I'm really keen to understand, I suppose, is what, like, just coming back to the hospitality piece and specifically, I guess, with your work with Pineapple and the
Mm.
work that you do on a wider basis. Is this? I mean, I would hope that there'll be a lot of people who'll be listening to this from the world of hospitality who will get it, like what we're talking about, who will understand and can see that perhaps there's some things that we could change that might make a difference, etc., etc. Is this the things that we're talking about today? Is this just a hospitality problem, or do you just see this kind of
You see it
everywhere,
everywhere, everywhere.
everywhere?
And this is the thing because we make it very clear in all the work. We can't come and tell anyone what to do because we've never done your job. We never worked in your company, right? So we look at everything before the job, which is essentially how do you help a group of people function as well as they possibly can do together. And if we do that, consequently, you become better at your job because of everything we've spoken about in this conversation. And so because of that, the problems we see are the same in all industries. How they manifest themselves is different because of the context they happen in. The nuance is different because of the industry or whatever it might be. But if you look at the core reasons why teams aren't functioning how they're functioning, or why teams can't deal with change or whatever it might be, they're all the same across the industry because it's people. Everything comes back to people. So they're inherently dealing with the same things. So say the difference is the context in which they happen. And therefore, how you deal with them is slightly different because there's nuance and there's, depending on the industry, but the fundamental problem is the same. And where hospitality is slightly different is it's the attritional nature of it is huge in terms of it's incredibly fast paced. It's quite a transient industry in terms of people coming and going and dipping in and out. But the actual human issue of that is the same as you'd have an insurance company, as you'd have it's actually how do we deal with when people come, join and leave from an understanding point of view, from a performance point of view. The difference in hospitality is maybe it happens quicker. That's what happens more often. So no, so the issues are the same across the board. And to be honest, when I've been talking this whole time, I haven't been talking with hospitality in my mind. I've just been talking from a very general team point of view, irrespective of industry and sector.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's cool comfort for the industry.
Yeah,
And from your work with Pineapple, from a trend perspective, I don't want to obviously give away everything and all things that you do.
Mm,
I would suggest to anyone and everyone that's listening to this is that you do go and sign up, because I think, as you guys have spoken about before, the more data that is shared, and it's shared anonymously,
Yeah.
the more we can get a proper true snapshot of the industry
Mm.
and identify potential areas that we might be able to improve on. And a lot of the time, it's probably quite a simple thing.
Yeah.
So is there a headline from all of that that you could give us that kind of, I don't know, just gives us hope or for the future of work or anything along those lines?
Well, I think the nice thing is now we this is our gosh, I think our second year doing it in the format we're in. So we're now actually able to generate some real insights and trends. And one of the ones that came out from last year is this correlation between internal progression, kind of team stability, and then your kind of levels of labor turnover. So the more people we can kind of bring through the system, so through the business, internally progress, particularly into kind of managerial roles, the more likely they are to stay. And I think and again, that's true of any team, right? If someone's coming through a system, you're emotionally connected to what you're doing, to the people you're doing it with, you're bought into what you're trying to do as an outcome point of view, you take all that shared understanding with you. So I think from that point of view, and that's where that's and again, I don't think hospitality is ever going to get to a point by nature of the industry, and I say the transient nature of it, and people coming and going. But there's definitely areas where the work can be done on that front,
Mm.
and particularly when we're moving, if people are moving from site to site within one brand, and again, that will probably always happen. But I think that the space to then go, cool, well, how do we actually manage that process? Like, how much time do we actually give this person? What more can we do to help their level of understanding of this new environment they're going into and the people they're working with and all that sort of stuff. But I think, as you say, the more, like anything, the more data we can get, the richer it is, the more tangible the insights and the trends are. And then the better people can make decisions, right? And I think that's really, as we say, that's the kind of the MO of the whole thing is just doing everything we can to help people make the best possible decisions they can when it comes to their people strategy, when it comes to how they want to build and grow their organizations. And it's amazing. There's a lady called Margaret Heffernan, who's an absolute oracle on all this stuff. I implore you, loads of TED Talks. She's amazing. And she's got this book called Beyond Measure. And she basically says we measure everything in business apart from the things that actually matter. And kind of this is the case in point, right? We
Yeah.
we have metrics for everything apart from the things that actually make the biggest difference, which is our people, and it is understanding and connection and all those sorts of things. We don't measure it, we don't track it. And now, yeah, there's probably an element of facetiousness to that comment, but the point is that we just don't spend any time doing it because perceptually all this other stuff is more important. And I think that the core, I suppose, of this whole conversation is this is the most important thing when it comes to a team. The most important thing when it comes to a team is the team.
No.
But it's amazing, isn't it? But and then then we've got to layer all the other stuff into that.
Yeah.
But we go the other way and we focus on all the other stuff, and the team kind of comes when we have a bit of space and have a bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, it almost flies in the face a little bit of reverse engineering the issue. Like if the outcome of the business is they want to make, I don't know, X amount of money, they'll reverse engineer that. What do we need? We need the best talent here, the best talent there, and all of that.
Mm.
But actually, maybe you don't need the best talent there. You just need a really cohesive group of people who all get that that is the objective in the first place, who
Mm.
have the skill to be able to fill in their blank within that whole piece of the
Mhm.
team to get to that. And then at that point and you're creating an environment where those people can have those open discussions when it's not quite going to plan, which is inevitable as well, right?
Mhm.
That's an inevitable part
Yeah, yeah,
of
absolutely.
life and business. But so that you can swing quickly and change something that just
Mm.
because you've created an environment where you have greater understanding of something. Get those right, and then actually the other stuff you can play with as you see fit. But that's kind of
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
like the core of what to kind of focus
Mm.
on in the first instance.
Yeah, 100%. I think and again, it's understanding you get businesses that set up to exit. You've got to hit a certain value in a certain amount of time. So therefore, by nature, that all decisions are going to be short term and going to be quick fixes to get you to that point. If you were to try and set up a long-term business like that, it wouldn't, it's not sustainable. It wouldn't work. And
Mm,
not well, it's my belief, but yeah, again, it's backed up now by loads of research and data is, the performance is an outcome, as in it's a byproduct of what you put in, right? So if we focus on people go, we want to have high performance, so you just focus at that bit, but like that is a consequence of all these other things. If we do all these things, we will perform. It's not we're going to perform and then we'll do this, And again, I think it just change. It sounds like quite a small change in how we view it, but the kind of knock-on effect decisions we then make is huge. Because if we're saying performance is the byproduct and actually we need to get all the other things right first, you're going to spend way more time making sure these things are right. Because if they're not, we're not going to perform. Whereas when you go, we need to hit performance here, to your point, you go, okay, I'll get this person, get this person, get this person, get this person, bring them in. And it might work for a period of time, but it's not built on anything. So then it drops off. So it's a nice short term. Yeah, you can probably do it in the short term, but it's not a sustained way of going. So yeah, so I just think it's all these things, these just slight shifts in how we view things and asking ourselves that whole do I think, do I know it, trying to bust our own assumptions and myths just puts us in a position to make way more informed decisions and go after the actual cause of these issues, not the assumed cause of the issues.
Yeah. Look, thank you. So I've spoken off microphone with you about this. I could speak to you all day about this stuff because I love it. And I think what you guys are doing at Pineapple is massively important to it is a kind of, it's a helping the industry piece of work as well in terms of hoping gaining some clarity on things that might make a difference. But notwithstanding your work with 101st as well, I'm just really endlessly fascinated by this kind of stuff. So I massively appreciate you making the time to have this chat today.
Thank you for having me on. It's been good.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Will.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. And there we have it. Will Fraser reminding us that performance isn't forced. It's built through understanding. A really thought-provoking episode. Massive thanks to him for giving up his time. We will, of course, be back next week with another awesome journey from hospitality, so have yourselves a cracking week, and I'll see you then.